Hello everyone, welcome to the final part of my Fire Emblem Libra build. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I made his armor as well as his axe. Starting off we have the pattern I made for the arm guards, and there are 3 separate layers that I used in this pattern, so I separated that out for each of the different sections. I then went ahead and cut out all the different pieces out of craft foam using an X-Acto knife. This is what the first and second layers look like when they are laid down, and I secured them all together using hot glue. Now here's where things get interesting. Initially I was going to use Libra to cover my arm guards, but at that time I only had small scraps laying around, and I wasn't really willing to spend all that money buying a whole new sheet to cover both of the arm guards. I happened to have leftover gold spandex from a previous project that I had just used to cover my Zelda armbands, and I figured that I could probably do a similar method with that to cover the arm guards as well. The only problem I had with that is that I didn't want the arm guards to be shiny, which was the whole reason I was using Thibra in the first place. So I had to figure out a way to make the gold spandex not metallic looking. And the easiest way around that was to just flip over the spandex, so I was using the wrong side of the fabric to show outwards onto the arm guards. In this clip here, I am heat forming my craft foam before I put the spandex on it, which is really important to help it keep its shape after you've completely covered it. One thing I like to do to help the craft foam keep its shape is to use a hair tie or rubber band to wrap around the craft foam, so as it cools down it will retain the same shape it was while it was being heated up. The way that you attach the spandex to the foam using the contact cement is to cover both layers with the contact cement, let them dry completely, and then stick them together. One thing that was a little bit different when I did the arm guards versus when I did Zelda's bracelets was that there were a lot more elevation changes, I guess, between the different layers of foam, so I had to be really careful in pressing it down to make sure there wouldn't be any rippling of the spandex when I pressed it down. Because the contact cement is so permanent once it touches together, you really have to go slow and press from one side, working your way over to the other. The final steps I had for making my arm guards be wearable was to sew a piece of elastic across the center. I also made the belt using the exact same method, and that is just hot glued onto a really wide corset-like belt that has elastic around the back. This is what my belt as well as my arm guards ended up looking like. I was able to make a couple adjustments in my technique between doing the belt and the arm guards, so I think they turned out overall really okay. So when making Libra's axe, the first thing I did was draw out sort of like a rough sketch, and then I transferred that sketch onto graph paper, and I did a legend between, I believe, one square was about 2 inches. I then made my own grid and used the smaller drawing as a reference when drawing out the shapes of the axe head. The stuff that I am carving the axe head out of is insulation foam. I got like a gigantic block of it from Home Depot, and I think it was like $25, and I've used it for a couple projects. I used 1-inch diameter piping to make the handle of Libra's axe, so I'm obviously only cutting out the axe head part out of the foam. When I designed the initial sketch, one of the big things I had to take into consideration was the fact that I needed to make my axe able to fit inside my suitcase. So to get around this, I actually have it that the handle breaks apart in the center with a connecting piece, as well as at the base of the axe head. So what I use to carve the insulation foam is this thing called a heated styrofoam wire cutter. I got this one from Amazon, but I originally had one that I got from Michael's in sort of like the floral section. It's very similar to a hot knife, except it's a lot thinner and longer, so you can cut much thicker pieces of foam with it. So as you can see, what I do is I try to make a clean cut all the way down, and after a while the foam will start to melt and stick to the wire, so I have to pull it out and then wipe it off on a piece of cardboard. I start off by doing the rough contour of the entire axe shape, and it just sort of pops out afterwards. So to make it have more of the blade shape, I need to angle all of the ridges down, so I draw a line down the center to mark where I'm going to angle the cuts down towards. The way that I attached the base of the axe was to basically carve out a hole in the center of the axe head, and you ideally would like to do this before you start shaving down the sides so you have more foam to work with. I think I carved one half and then realized that I still had to put the hole in for the connector, so I ended up making the hole for it before I carved the second half of the axe. After you've made a hole that's about the same size as the pipe connector, I basically hot glued that in and then covered the entire thing with a layer of epoxy clay to disguise it. This is after the fact, since I have actually worn this costume to a con and I flew with the axe in my suitcase. I did have a little bit of an issue when I first got it out because the axe, the foam had actually started to crack and like split right at where the epoxy clay was meeting it. And I think this was because the epoxy clay is just so sturdy as opposed to the foam, which still has a bit of spring in it. So it got rattled around in the suitcase and ended up coming dislodged a little bit. But it wasn't actually a tough fix. I just had to use some hot glue and like fill in the gaps. After you're done carving out the foam, I sanded mine down with just like a loose piece of sandpaper. After that, I covered it in some layers of watered down wood glue. Then for the next layer of sealant after that, I used Plasti Dip, which is a rubber coating I think originally designed for cars, but I've seen quite a few cosplayers use it on sealing foam, which I had done in the past as well. For painting the handle, I first use a primer and then this gold spray paint and then eventually a sealer. For the gold detailing along the edges of the axe head, I used gold leaf paint, which also has a very strong smell, so I would definitely try doing that in a ventilated area if you can. And then to finish it all off, I also coated the axe head in a layer of sealer. And with that, my costume was completely done. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It's been a long process. Libra was a lot more intensive than I thought he was going to be, and I learned a lot in making him. I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed watching this series, and I'm going to do more cosplay worklogs in the future, so please check them out as they come. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!